It was my second week at Fairview Reform School, a bleak, run-down building isolated on the edge of a sprawling forest. The place was a maze of grim hallways and dark corners, with paint peeling off the walls and the smell of mildew hanging in the air. The other kids didn't talk much and the teachers were cold and distant. But something else bothered me more than the drab surroundings. Room 109. Everyone avoided it like the plague. Whenever I asked about it, people just shook their heads or quickly changed the subject. Rumor had it that something horrible had happened in there years ago, but no one would say what. One night, I decided I had to know. I waited until lights out, then slipped out of bed and into the hall. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old building settling. My footsteps were muffled against the worn carpet as I crept closer to room 109. The door was locked, but I had swiped a master key from the janitor's office earlier in the day. My heart pounded in my chest as I slipped the key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open with a low groan. Inside, it was pitch black. The air was thick and musty, and I could barely see a few feet in front of me. I reached for the light switch, but it didn't work. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight to illuminate the room. There was a single bed pushed against the wall, the sheets stained and torn. The walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked like they had been made by fingernails. In the center of the room, a dark, wet stain spread across the floorboards. I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder, and I could hear a faint whispering like a chorus of hushed voices all around me. Then, I saw it. A figure standing in the corner, barely visible in the dim light. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its mouth opened in a silent scream. My phone flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck and heard a voice, low and raspy, whisper, "Get out!" I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but no one came. The whispers grew louder, closer, until they were right in my ear. I felt invisible hands grabbing at me, pulling me back toward the dark corner. In a blind panic, I kicked the door, hard. It flew open and I stumbled out, gasping for air. The next day, the school was buzzing with rumors. They said room 109 had been locked for a reason, that a boy had gone mad in there years ago, scratching at the walls until his fingers bled, screaming about something in the shadows. He disappeared, they said, but some nights you could still hear him, crying and scratching, trying to get out. I couldn't sleep that night. The encounter in room 109 haunted my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the glowing eyes in the dark and felt the cold breath on my neck. I hadn't told anyone what happened. Who would believe me? They'd think I was just trying to stir up drama or get attention. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next day, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror and noticed the deep shadows under my eyes. I wasn't imagining things. I knew what I saw. I tried to avoid the hall near room 109, but my curiosity got the better of me. I started asking around, but everyone seemed hesitant, almost scared to talk about it. Finally, a kid named Kevin, who had been at Fairview for over a year, pulled me aside. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Why? What's in there?" I pressed. He hesitated, then lowered his voice even more. "There was a kid. His name was Tommy. He was kinda quiet, kept to himself. One day, he just lost it. Started screaming about something in his room, said it was watching him from the shadows. He tried to get out, but the door wouldn't open. They found him 2 days later, just gone. Like, he ran away?" I asked, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Kevin shook his head. "No, there was blood on the walls and the room was a mess, but there was no sign of him, just gone." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had to know more. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I snuck back out to room 109. I had brought a flashlight this time, and a small pry bar I had stolen from the maintenance closet, just in case the door locked on me again. When I reached the room, the door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been inside since I last opened it. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed it open, half expecting the figure to be standing there in the corner again. But the room was empty, just like before. I scanned the walls with my flashlight, looking closer at the scratches. They were deep, much deeper than I had realized, almost like claw marks, and the stain on the floor, it looked fresher now, like it hadn't dried in decades. I moved closer, feeling the temperature drop with every step. The whispers started again, just like before, growing louder and more frantic. Then, I saw it. a small door, almost hidden behind a piece of rotting furniture. It wasn't a normal door, it was tiny, barely big enough for a child to crawl through. It looked old, ancient even, with strange symbols carved around the edges. I crouched down, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. It was ice cold to the touch. I hesitated, then slowly pulled it open. The smell hit me first, a foul, rotting stench that made me gag. I shone my flashlight inside and saw a narrow, dark tunnel leading down into the depths of the building. A gust of cold air blew out from the tunnel, and I heard the whispering again, clearer this time. "Come down. Come play with us." I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking. I had to get out of there. I turned and ran for the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The room was plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered and went out. I fumbled for the handle, panic setting in. I pulled with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. I felt something cold and clammy touch my shoulder, and I screamed. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, surrounding me from all sides. And then I heard it, a child's voice, clear and close, right in my ear. "You shouldn't have come back." The door burst open, and I stumbled out, falling to the floor. I scrambled to my feet and ran down the hallway, not stopping until I was back in my room, gasping for breath. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the light on, staring at the door, waiting for it to open, waiting for the whispers to start again. And I knew one thing for sure. I had to find out what was in that tunnel, or it would never leave me alone. Story 2. The Overseer. Reform school wasn't supposed to be a vacation, but the Blackthorn Institute was something else. Nestled in the middle of a dense, fog-covered forest, it looked more like a prison than a school. The windows were barred, and the doors were locked every night. They said it was to keep us safe, but I wasn't sure who or what they were trying to protect us from. I didn't belong here. My parents said it was the last resort after my latest incident, but this place, it was different. I started hearing stories from the other kids about the Overseer, a figure that supposedly roamed the halls at night. They said he was a former warden, a cruel man, who vanished under mysterious circumstances, but never truly left. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling every time I heard footsteps echoing in the empty halls. One night I was on janitorial duty, cleaning up the cafeteria after dinner. The clock showed it was past curfew, but I was in no hurry to get back to my room. I took my time, mopping slowly, listening to the creaks and groans of the old building. Then I heard its soft footsteps, followed by the unmistakable jingle of keys. I turned, expecting to see one of the staff, but the hallway was empty. I shrugged it off and went back to my work, but the footsteps came closer, louder this time. I felt a chill and turned again, but no one was there. Then I saw him, a tall, shadowy figure standing at the end of the hall, his face obscured by darkness. He held a large ring of keys and stared at me, unblinking. My heart stopped. I blinked, and he was gone. I shook my head, convinced it was a trick of the light, and finished my task as quickly as I could. As I left the cafeteria, the hallway lights flickered and I felt a cold breeze. The footsteps started again, this time accompanied by a faint whispering. I turned the corner and saw him again, closer now. I could make out his face, pale with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. His keys jingled as he slowly approached. I bolted, racing down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the empty building. The lights flickered more, and I could hear him behind me, closer and closer, his laughter low and hollow. I reached my room and slammed the door shut, my hands trembling. The next morning I asked around about the Overseer. A kid named Mark, who'd been here longer than most, told me a story. He said the Overseer used to lock kids in the basement when they misbehaved, but one day he just disappeared. Some said he was murdered by the kids who finally snapped. Others said he was still alive, hiding in the walls, waiting for the right moment to come back. I tried to laugh it off, but that night I heard the footsteps again, slow and deliberate, and the jingle of keys right outside my door. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the image of the Overseer. The pale face, the hollow eyes, the keys jangling as he moved closer. I started to notice things. The lights in the hallways flickered more often at night, and I could swear I heard footsteps outside my room, slow and deliberate, like someone was pacing, searching. The other kids noticed too. Mark told me he'd seen shadows moving along the walls, and a girl named Jenna said she'd heard someone whispering her name in the middle of the night. No one wanted to talk about it, but the fear was there, a silent tension that hung over all of us. One night, I decided to get to the bottom of it. I waited until everyone was asleep, then crept out of my room, carrying a flashlight and a small pocket knife I had managed to keep hidden from the staff. The building was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the electricity and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. I made my way to the basement, where the rumors said the overseer had locked up the kids who misbehaved. The door was rusted, and it took all my strength to push it open. The air was damp and cold, and the smell of mold and decay filled my nostrils. I shone my flashlight around, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw a series of heavy iron doors lining the walls. They were old, far older than the rest of the building. I approached the first one and saw deep scratches on the surface, as if someone had clawed at it desperately. I tried the handle, but it was locked tight. I moved to the next door and the next, each one the same, locked, with deep scratches and faded stains. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, coming from the end of the hallway. "Help me!" I turned, my flashlight beam shaking, and saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a boy, no older than me, his clothes torn and dirty, his eyes wide with fear. He held out his hands, which were covered in blood, and whispered again, "Please, help me." I took a step back, my heart racing. "Who are you?" The boy looked over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear, and then he whispered, He's coming back." The lights flickered, and the boy was gone. I heard the jingle of keys, faint at first, then louder. The air grew colder, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly and saw him, the overseer, standing at the far end of the hallway, his hollow eyes fixed on me, his lips curled into a twisted grin. I ran, sprinting down the hallway, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps slow and deliberate, the keys jingling with each step. I reached the basement door and yanked it open, slamming it shut behind me. I pressed my back against the door, panting, my heart pounding in my chest. I waited, listening for the footsteps, but there was only silence. I turned and bolted up the stairs, not stopping until I was back in my room. The next day, I asked Mark if he knew anything about the boy. He looked at me with wide eyes and whispered, "That was Tommy. He disappeared last year. They said he ran away, but some of us think the overseer took him." I knew I had to find out the truth. That night, I went back to the basement, but the door was locked, and no one would give me the key. The lights continued to flicker. The whispers grew louder, and the footsteps outside my door never stopped. I realized then that the overseer wasn't just a ghost. He was something worse, something that fed on our fear, that grew stronger every time we believed in him. And I knew he wouldn't stop until he had taken us all. Story 3. The Night Watch. My first night at Briarwood Academy, I heard about the Night Watch. The seniors warned us during orientation. They said every night a group of kids patrolled the halls. Not the staff, not the guards, kids like us. But they weren't doing it for fun. They were looking for something, or someone. The rules were simple. Stay in your room after lights out, lock your door, don't make a sound. And whatever you do, don't let them find you. I thought it was just some stupid prank to scare the newbies, but the fear in their eyes told me otherwise. So, that night, I locked my door and stayed under the covers, my heart pounding as I listened. At first, it was quiet. Then, around midnight, I heard them, soft footsteps outside my door. I held my breath, listening as they passed by, whispering to each other. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could feel their urgency. They were searching for something. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I heard a soft knock, then a voice, low and strained. "Please, let me in." I froze. The voice didn't belong to any of the kids I had met. It sounded desperate, scared. I didn't move. The doorknob rattled, and the voice came again, louder this time. "Please, they're coming! They're coming for me!" My heart raced, and I wanted to open the door, but something told me not to. I stayed silent, and after what felt like an eternity, the voice faded. The footsteps continued down the hall, further and further away, until they were gone. The next morning, I asked about the Night Watch. No one wanted to talk about it, but one of the older kids, a girl named Sarah, finally broke down. She said it wasn't the Night Watch we should fear, but what they were looking for. She said there was something in the walls, something that had been here long before us, and it was hungry. I wanted to laugh it off, but that night I heard the footsteps again, closer this time, and the voice, still desperate, still pleading, "Please, let me in. Don't let them find me." And I realized then that the real horror wasn't the Night Watch. It was what happened when they found you. The whispers about the Night Watch grew louder as the days passed. I noticed the fear in the older kids' eyes when they spoke about it, the way they would glance over their shoulders, as if expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. I tried to ask questions, but no one would give me a straight answer. Sarah, the girl who had warned me about the thing in the walls, finally pulled me aside one afternoon. "You need to listen," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The Night Watch isn't a prank. They're real, and they're looking for it. Looking for what? I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, there's something in this place. Something old. The teachers won't talk about it, but some of the kids know. It's been here longer than the school, longer than any of us. They say it's in the walls, but I think it's everywhere. I felt a chill run down my spine. What? Sarah's eyes darted around, making sure no one was listening. She continued in a whisper. I think it feeds on fear. I've heard it moving. At night, when it's quiet, if you listen closely, you can hear it scratching inside the walls, like it's trying to get out. The night watch is supposed to keep it contained, but sometimes it gets out anyway. Why not just leave? I asked, the fear creeping into my voice. Sarah shook her head. They don't let you leave, not until you graduate or disappear, and no one has graduated in years. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's words. I locked my door, as usual, and sat on my bed, my ears straining for any sound. Midnight came, and with it, the familiar soft footsteps of the night watch. I heard them moving down the hall, slow and steady, but then something different. A faint scratching, a soft, persistent noise like nails on wood. I moved closer to the wall, pressing my ear against it. The sound was coming from inside. It was unmistakable, a slow, deliberate scratching. I pulled back, heart pounding, and suddenly the scratching stopped. I listened, holding my breath, and then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, right on the other side of the wall. Let me out. Please! I jumped back, stifling a scream. The voice sounded young, terrified, but there was something off about it, something that made my skin crawl. I sat back down, clutching my blanket, my mind racing. What was in the walls? And why did it sound like a kid? Then I heard the footsteps of the night watch again, closer this time. They stopped outside my door. I froze, barely breathing as a soft knock echoed through the room. I didn't move. The knock came again, louder this time. Let us in, a voice said from the other side, calm but insistent. We're here to help you. I stayed silent, my heart racing. The doorknob rattled and the voice repeated. Let us in. We need to make sure it hasn't gotten to you. I knew the rule, never open the door for the night watch. But I could feel them waiting, their presence heavy on the other side. Then the voice softened. Please. It's safer with us. I almost believed it, almost reached for the doorknob. But then I heard it. The soft scratching, this time behind the door, like something was waiting with them, something desperate to get in. I backed away, covering my ears, and whispered to myself, No, no, no! The footsteps moved on, fading down the hall. The scratching stopped. For a moment, everything was quiet, and I thought I was safe. But then, I heard the voice again, this time from the other side of the room. Please, let me in. I don't want to be alone anymore. I turned slowly, and there by the window I saw a shape, a small, hunched figure, its face hidden in shadow. Its hands were pressed against the glass, its fingers long and thin, almost skeletal. It was staring right at me, and even though I couldn't see its eyes, I felt its gaze piercing into me. It whispered again, more urgent now. Let me in. They're coming for me. I backed away, my back hitting the door. The figure pressed closer against the window, its fingers leaving streaks on the glass. Then suddenly, the door behind me was yanked open and I fell backward into the hallway. The night watch stood there, their faces pale and expressionless, their eyes wide and empty. Stay away from the window, one of them hissed, grabbing me by the arm. Don't listen to it. I was pulled to my feet, and they hurried me down the hall, away from my room, away from the window. I glanced back and saw the figure still there, still staring, its hands now pressed flat against the glass. The night watch led me to a small room at the end of the hall, a room I'd never seen before. Inside, it was bare except for a single chair and a dim light hanging from the ceiling. They shoved me into the chair and closed the door behind them, locking it with a loud click. Wait, what are you doing? I shouted, panic rising in my throat. One of them leaned in close, his breath cold against my face. We need to make sure it hasn't touched you. I shivered, my mind racing. What is it? What's in the walls? They didn't answer. Instead, they began to whisper among themselves, their eyes darting back and forth as if they were afraid of what I might say or do. Then from behind the door, I heard it again, the scratching, the soft, persistent scratching, coming closer, closer, until it was right outside the room. And the whispering, the same voice from before, pleading, Please, let me in. The night watch stepped back, their faces drained of color. One of them turned to me, his voice trembling. Don't move. Don't speak. It's drawn to sound. I sat there frozen. As the scratching grew louder, more frantic, and the whispering turned to a low, desperate wail. The light flickered above me and I felt a cold breeze blow through the room even though the windows were shut. And then the door began to rattle. The night watch moved closer, their eyes wide with fear. One of them raised a finger to his lips, motioning for me to stay silent, but the whispering outside grew louder, more desperate, and I felt something brush against my foot, something cold and wet. I looked down and I saw it. Black, oily water seeping under the door, spreading across the floor, reaching for me. I wanted to scream, but I remembered their warning and held my breath, clenching my teeth so hard my jaw ached. The water continued to spread, and the door rattled harder, the wood creaking as if something was pushing against it, trying to get in. Then all at once, everything went silent. The scratching stopped, the whispering ceased, and the door stood still. The night watch exchanged nervous glances, and one of them slowly reached for the doorknob, turning it with a soft click. He opened the door just a crack, and I saw his eyes widen in horror. He slammed it shut, his face pale, and whispered, "It's inside now." I felt my blood run cold as I realized the truth. Whatever it wasn't in the walls anymore. It was in the building, and it was looking for us. And it would find us, no matter where we hid.